Yeah, so typically if there's a marketplace, there's four main strategies on how to kickstart a marketplace. They have differing levels of value. And part of the problem is you've got the supply and demand that you need to build up, and you need to balance the two as they go. So the question is, can you just supply one side of the marketplace? So can you be the supply in order to drive demand, or can you source the demand like through a like over index on that and kind of do that in-house, and then source the supply? And so that's often the strategies kind of involve around that. Now, the one ways to do it is just to raise a ton of venture capital funding and flood the market with marketing and put yourself out there and just hopefully fill both of them with marketing spend. That is typically the worst way to do it, but it does work. Silicon Valley has proven that it works over and over again, even if your business model makes no sense at all. So that is one way, but typically doesn't work in African markets, but just to get that out of the way. The second way to do it is to be the supply. So if you're like in an auction site's going to be a bit of a difficult one on this, but is there a way that you can go and source and find the items, and then you're only trying to fill the demand, and then you're going to people saying, hey, we have all these good for sale, do you want to fill the demand, or how do you fill that? Another third strategy would be to say, how do you find the demand? So how do you find an auction site or somebody else in the ecosystem where you can supply them with goods that they auction? So you basically have one customer on the demand side, which is another auction site or some kind of channel that you can access an existing base of demand from. And then you focus on how do you get the supply, how do you aggregate that in, and then connect that through. So both of those two strategies are you being one side of you being the supply or being the demand, so that you can focus just on building the other side. And over time, you can start normalizing that wider. And then the fourth strategy to launch a marketplace type site, which might be one that makes a lot more sense for you, is to just pick a really, really tiny niche. So if you pick an incredibly narrow niche, it becomes a lot easier to fill the demand and the supply side. So if you're auctioning old books, there's only so many people, or there's just like targeting people who have books to sell, and you have people who might want to buy old books. Like that becomes a very far easier thing for you to spend and focus your marketing spend on, or focus your strategies of acquisition on. And so you can start building momentum in a particular niche, and then you start expanding out into old candlesticks or antiques or whatever that is from the books out. And so you can start expanding into adjacent niches from there. So typically those are, if you look at any kind of marketing site, those are going to be your four main strategies at a very high level on how to do that. I'll drop a link to my my blog in here. I'll try and find the link, but I've written about marketing sites before and those strategies in a bit more detail. So I'll throw that in there. It's just medium.com/Roger Nort, and you can find some stories there. Yeah, there we go. Let me just throw this in here. So that's like if you're launching any kind of marketplace, that's typically, you'll find a story on my Medium there around marketplaces that unpacks those four strategies and in a bit more details and how you might be able to tackle it. So normally when you're looking at launching a site, that's kind of the strategy that you want to do. As far as like channel experiments, like there's no golden rule here. It's more about being experimental in your approach. There's a channel traction framework, which I believe is something you should be able to Google, and there's like 30 different channels that you can test, and you pick 4 or 5 that might apply to your scenario, and you run some experiments off the back of that. So there are ways of testing different channels, but as far as the go-to-market strategy of how do you think about what is the MVP of your product, normally with a marketplace, you need to try and cut it down and focus it on one side of the marketplace, or just a very, very thin slice of what your marketplace could be. Or just raise a ton of funding and throw money at it and hope something sticks.